What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another devotion video. Today we're going to be going over 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Here's the reading. And now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. In the midst of the very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people, and they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. So we urged Titus, just as he had earlier made a beginning, to also to completion this act of grace on your part. But since you excel in everything, in faith, speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in love we have kindled in you, see that you also excel in the grace of giving. I am not commanding you, but I want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, and so that you through his poverty might become rich. And here is my judgment about what is best for you in this matter. Last year you were the first not only to give, but also to have the desire to do so. Now finish the work, so that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion of it, according to your means. For if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. Our desire is that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but that there might be equality. At the present time your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn their plenty will supply what you need. The goal in equality is equality, as it is written, the one who gathered much did not have too much, but the one who gathered little did not have too little. This last section is called Titus Sent to Receive the Collection. Thanks be to God, who put into the heart of Titus the same concern I have for you. For Titus not only welcomed our appeal, but he is coming to you with much enthusiasm and on his own initiative. And we are sending along with him the brother who is praised by all the churches for his service to the gospel. What is more, he has chosen by the churches to accompany us as we carry the offering, which we administer in order to honor the Lord himself, and to show our eagerness to help. We want to avoid any criticism of the way we administer this liberal gift, for we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man. In addition, we are sending with them our brother, who has often proved to us in many ways that he is zealous, and now even more so because of his great confidence in you. As for Titus, he is my partner and co-worker among you. As for our brothers, they are representatives of the churches in honor to Christ. Therefore, show these men the proof of your love and the reason for our pride in you, so that the churches can see it. Second Corinthians chapter 8 prayer model. Lord, you are so kind and full of care towards me. You are a generous God, and fill me with joy to those who are generous. Lord, let your kindness pervade my life to show the same kindness towards those with whom I come in contact. When I am tested, please help me to continue to have abundant joy. Help my joy in what you have done for me to overflow into rich generosity. Help me to be generous with all of the resources you put into my hands. Father, you have enabled me to excel in this life of faith. You equip me to do the good works to which you have called me. Lord, let me be encouraged in giving. Supply resources and help me be generous with all things. Help me excel in every aspect of my faith. Give me enthusiasm for growing greatly in the things of God. Jesus, you have been so generous to me in your grace and love. For Jesus, who became poor and made me rich in faith and hope. Lord, I receive your grace afresh and anew today. Let me be rich in every way so I can be a blessing to others. Amen. Yo, what's going on, guys? This is going to be the NIV Study Bible questions for 2 Corinthians chapter 8. That being said, let's get into the first question. We got 5 questions on this one. First question. Is giving an indicator of God's grace in us? This is referencing verses 1 through 2 and 7. This is what they wrote down. Paul connects the grace of God to sacrificial giving, not just general giving. The Macedonian Christians gave out of their poverty so their spiritual brothers and sisters in Judea might be sustained during famine and persecution. Giving sacrificially is Christ-like, for Christ sacrificed himself for us. Giving is an evidence of the grace of God at work in the giver. Next question. Does the amount we give indicate God's grace in us? This is also referencing verses 1 through 2 and 7. This is what they wrote down. Yes, lots of grace leads to lots of giving. Grace is God's gift, free gift to us. We never lack it because his grace is sufficient. God's grace overflows to others in a variety of ways, including the giving of gifts. So you could take this question and you could say, if you are a very generous giver, you could say that you have God's grace within you. Now, does that mean if you're not a giver, do you have God's grace within you? I wouldn't go as far as saying that, but I think as Christians, if you truly follow, what Jesus talked about and what Jesus did for you, I would say it's almost harder not to give to a brother or sister in need, I get the whole tithing thing is a big deal. A lot of people are like, well, I'm only going to give $10 because, I don't really have that money right now, and I understand that, but honestly, we should be giving what we desire to give. If you desire to give, $100 to church, or let's say it's not even about tithing. Let's say another brother or sister was in need and they're like, yo, man, I'm really struggling to pay my rent. I just need an extra $50. Are you going to be reluctant to give that person money, or are you going to say, you know what, man, here's $50. I don't want you to go without shelter. That's just dumb. I think that's what the question's really leading towards right now is, giving to brothers and sisters, giving to someone in need. Because no one should be starving, right? Like, no one should be starving. No one should be missing bills. And let's say these people are hard workers, let's say, a couple who, the man is working 2 jobs and they still can't sustain their rent. I would just be, have mercy on them. Your Father in heaven had mercy on you, so you should have mercy on other people. And I get sometimes that's hard, because sometimes we see homeless people on the street and we're like, man, you need to get a job, bro. But at the same time, we also have to look at their circumstance and situations, and we can't judge them. We can't condemn them, and we can't say get a job, because we don't really know what's going on or what they're going through. So before you sit and tell someone get a job, really just have a little bit of mercy and compassion, because what if that was you? What if you were in a tight spot and someone was like, well, just get a job? Like, what if you were struggling to pay rent and someone told you, well, just get a second job then? That's not very merciful, not very compassionate. So I just think these 2 questions are really emphasizing on, God's grace being evident in our life in a way to where you're having compassion and mercy on your brothers and sisters. But anyway, we'll move on to the next question here. Don't mind my washer in the background. Sorry about that if that's a loud noise. The next question is, was Paul motivating them out of pride? This is referencing verse 8. Not exactly. Perhaps example is a better word. Paul had just said that because of God's gift of grace in us, we should all want to give. But there are times when the free flow of grace in the lives of some may be blocked for one reason or another, cutting off the source of their generosity. At such times, the example of others who can freely give serve as a model of inspiration to increase the flow of grace. Next question. Should Christians and churches today have an equal distribution of wealth? This is referencing verses 13 through 15. This is what they wrote down. We must remember that nothing we have is actually ours. Money, homes, cars, even family. It all belongs to God. It is on loan from Him to be used for His purposes and for His kingdom. So when those around us are in need, we should offer the resources God has given to us to meet those needs. Paul was encouraging the Corinthians to use their surplus blessings to meet the needs of Jewish Christians in Judea. So I feel like a lot of people struggle with this, and I feel like sometimes I do too. You go to work, a lot of people get paid bi-weekly, so, you get your paycheck, every 2 weeks, you're doing your budget, you got to pay your bills, and, someone asks you for money, I would say a lot of people, are pretty smart with their money, they have a good savings built up, and, what if God asked you to give that to somebody? What if God asked you, hey, you know what? You have a brother over here who's struggling, he needs $1,000. Are you gonna, I would say I would be reluctant on that. I'll be the first one to not say, well, I'm not gonna answer that question. I'm gonna be the first one to say, I'm definitely gonna be reluctant on that too, because I can definitely be a little stubborn when it comes to money. I can go out and purchase, $1,000 worth of something that I want to buy, but when it comes to giving it away to somebody, is that something that I'm going to do gracefully? I mean, it would take a lot of prayer for me. I just want to say that right now. I'm not sure about you guys, but for me, it would take a lot of prayer and a lot of concentration. I'd say, all right, we're doing this for a good purpose, But I think it also goes back to what we're willing to give, and I think that's what really matters, right? Like if your brother is struggling, you're like, hey man, I'm gonna give you $500 because you're struggling, bro, and you know what, $500, man, I'll make that up next paycheck. And obviously if you don't have that money, don't give that money, right? Like don't put yourself in debt because a brother is struggling, because then now you're both gonna be struggling. So don't do that. Yeah, don't put yourself in debt because of another brother struggling, unless you can somehow pay that debt off within a week or something. Do that. Obviously be a good steward of your money, but don't be stubborn with it like me. Be freely giving, right? And I think a lot of people can have a hard time with that, even with their family too. I love how it said, even family belongs to God. I see a lot of the times parents, they'll say, oh, my kids are everything to me. My child's in school, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's doing this, he's doing that. So many parents get caught up in their kids' lives that they actually forget about their own. They make their whole life revolve around their kid. And then when their kid moves out at like 19, 20, then the parents are like, well, now what do we do? You just spent 18 years, raising this kid, and here they go, they're leaving. And a lot of people, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to, I've seen some parents get really depressed, because they don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know what to do with their life, and I've seen that. And personally, I'm not a parent, but that's just what I've seen as just being, someone who is a son. And my family, I'm an only child, and I've seen my family go, when I first moved out, my parents were texting me every day. Every day they were texting me, every day they wanted to know how I was doing. And, eventually, when I married my wife, I had to set those boundaries, because I was like, yo, you guys need to, y'all need to figure something out, because texting me every day is not going to work. Like, I got a job, I got school, I got all these things that I need to do, and it's just not going to work. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying, don't talk to me in kind of that rude of a way. I'm just saying, I'm not going to be able to text you every day. So, if I'm not a parent yet, so obviously I can't give advice where I haven't really experienced anything. But it's just what I've seen, just from some of the couples in church that I've talked to in my life group that I've seen. I got this couple who, they have 3 kids, one's in high school and 2 of their daughters are in college. They're so excited for their daughters, but you can also kind of see on the back shadow of their faces, where it's kind of like they're kind of down a little bit, because they've invested so much into their kids, which is great. We should invest time into our kids and raise them up as to be, disciples of the Lord, and really love the Lord, and really give to Him all our strength, But if your kid moves to another state, you have to realize that, this is why I think marriage is so important. This is why I think marriage is such a big deal, because I was talking to one of my coworkers the other day, and I was telling her, all about, Jesus, and I was kind of just telling her, for me personally, I would value my wife more than my kids. And she asked me why. I said, well, my children belong to the Lord. They're not really my kids. They're the Lord's kids. And she had a hard time with that, and she goes, well, my kids would come before my spouse. I said, I understand that, but when your kids move out and you've invested all this time into your kids, what are you going to do with your spouse after they're gone? You're not going to know how to talk to each other. You're not going to know how to date. You're not going to know what they like to do now. It's been 18 years since you had a conversation with these people, and it's just, I've seen a lot of marriage. I mean, you can look at the statistics. A lot of marriages fail after the kids move out because the parents, they don't know how to talk to each other. So I would just encourage you to, if you're a parent, I would encourage you to really, really date your spouse. I mean, continue dating. I understand it's hard, busy time, but don't let go of that. And pour into your kids. Obviously, your kids are the greatest discipleship you could ever do. Right? I mean, you could raise up the next Moses, you could raise up the next Peter, the next Paul, you as a parent have that potential, because of God's gift to us of reproduction. Us as Christians have one of the greatest opportunities of all time, of creating some of the greatest disciples ever known. We have that opportunity, we have that power, and it's only through God that we have that power, and it's incredibly encouraging to know that. But we'll move on to the last question here, which is, should we flaunt our donations? This is referencing verses 24. This is what they wrote down. No. Jesus said the Father values secret giving. Paul's concern here relates to our motivation for telling others what we do, not the telling itself. Jesus also said we should let others see our good deeds so that they will praise God. Paul was not encouraging flaunting. He simply wanted examples of giving to encourage the whole community of believers to give toward the whole WOW project. Right. So this comes with, if you guys read Matthew, this also comes with praying, giving. Don't let your righteousness be seen in front of others to be seen. That's the context there is, are you praying and doing these things in public because you want to be seen, or are you doing it because you are actually being genuine about it? And that's only a question you can answer. I can't even answer that for you. Obviously, we shouldn't flaunt our donations. We shouldn't say, oh, I'm better than you. It's kind of like the story between the tax collector and the I can't remember what that other guy's job was, but he came in and, the righteous man or something, I think it was like a Pharisee or something. The Pharisee was saying, well, at least I'm not like that tax collector over there, And the other guy was like, well, Lord, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner, type of thing. So I just think there comes a point where we need to talk about what we're doing, but it also should come at like, I'm doing it for the glory of God, not because I'm trying to be better than somebody, and not because I'm trying to say I'm better or more righteous, but I'm doing this for the glory and purpose of God and for his purpose on my life. There's a reason he asked me to do this. You might not know the reason, but I do, and that's okay, type of ordeal. But anyway, guys, that was the last question. I won't take up too much of your time here. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys want to talk about any of these questions in the comments, let me know. Be sure to comment anything, prayer requests, or anything like that down below. And may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may he be with you always.